Okay, well, for the last time, thanks for being here. We've now got the panel. Everybody who's been performing will now be answering questions from Luis. And from the audience, if we can. We've strictly got to stick to time and switch everything off at 9:30 though, so yeah, we may not have that luxury. Anyway, Luis.
Thanks, Daniel. Just quick review names and everything before we get to the questions. So we have here to my left, Chad, aka half or a third of Glitch Lich, depending.
Correct.
And then next, Tim, right? Am I right? Aka Winterlight, and Paul, aka Slackk. Yes.
Hello.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, for being part of this. So let's go straight to the questions because we are tight on time. And this is one for all of you, but I think it'll maybe have different resonances for each one of you. And that is, in this digital age, this increasing online social media age, how important is it to be from a particular place or to be in a particular place, like a physical, spatial place for you guys? Anybody can jump in.
I'll go first. From our perspective, it's weird because obviously, like, we run a club night and it's kind of based around, the London grime scene theoretically, but the producers that we play, particularly over the last 18 months to 2 years, it's really opened up. So, we can be playing people like Rabbit, who's from Houston in Texas, or a fellow called Strickface, who we play a lot of, and he's from Adelaide in Australia. So, a couple of years ago, those sorts of avenues wouldn't have been open for those producers to hear the music that we're making and in turn sort of make it and influence it. And what I suppose was quite a UK-based scene has kind of spread its wings in a sense, from our perspective anyway.
Thanks. Either of you want to jump in?
I don't think it makes any difference at all where you come from and where you live. So from my point of view, I largely exist in a bedroom. And that bedroom could be anywhere. I'm signed to a label from Oakland in California, and I probably play more gigs in Italy than I do anywhere else.
I like how the bedroom is kind of nowhere for you, at least the way that you framed it. That's great. Chad,
I probably have the most agnostic response, which is the band that I play with is already like spread apart very far. Like I live in Brighton, and my brother lives in New York City, and Cole lives in Shanghai, and yeah, so it matters very little where we are. I mean, it's nice because we get to get all these shows in all these different places, so it's nice, but I feel like the particular location that we're at, and it's changed drastically since we've started playing, has meant, I feel like we started in California, in Oakland actually, and I think that informed our aesthetic, but has since meant less over time.
Okay, great, thanks. So following up with the second question, again, this is, I think, for everyone, and this is sort of more directly connected to the theme of VEM, of this research project, around networking and sort of valuing between artists and so on. Have you ever been in a position to get other people's music heard or played, or attention brought to someone else's music, a DJ or producer and so on, and what has that meant for you, or how were you able to do that?
Back to me again. I would say, in all honesty, in terms of my own position, because obviously, a DJ's perspective is quite different to yourselves because you're playing, your own individual music, whereas there's kind of an exclusivity in terms of DJing where, you'll only make your name because you've got a certain sound that no one else has. If you're just playing stuff that you can readily get and everyone can, there's no audience for you because you could be anyone. So, in a sense, I kind of made my own name in terms of DJing because I was playing quite unknown people and quite unknown songs, and then you're booked on the basis of that. Or our club night, in all honesty, and our sound is based on the idea of sort of tiny cliques of producers pushing all this stuff together and trying to be I don't know, a scene within itself. So yeah, I mean, I think I have created exposure for a lot of people in that sense, but it's also in turn created exposure for me. It's like a two-way process in a way. Like I have got people signed to stuff I've played. That happens, semi-regularly, I suppose. So it does occur, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier, and I think this is quite a difficult part of being online. There's a certain sense in which you're there kind of marketing yourself and pushing yourself on people. And certainly after I signed to M5MD, which within the little bit of electronic music that I get involved in is quite a well-known label, people started to turn up in my inbox asking if they could remix tracks and asking if I could pass on a demo to Mike do, the label boss. And that's pretty much exactly what I used to do before I was signed to M5MD. And in fact, one of the bands that, a band that I absolutely love, Port Royal from Italy, that I spoke to and eventually pestered my way into a remix, are also now signed to M5MD, and it was through that connection that I was introduced to the label. So yeah, there's a lot of that goes on, and people are always trying to see if you can help them. And it's difficult because sometimes the people who want to see if you can help them are really great and they're fantastic and frankly they're better than me and I'd love them to remix my stuff. And sometimes they're crap. And it's difficult to say no to people. I find that I don't get involved as much in online stuff now because I didn't really like the sort of person I was becoming. I didn't really like having to push myself onto other people, and I didn't really like having to make those judgments about people and say, you know, actually I don't really like your music, but I can't bring myself to tell you I don't really like your music, so I'm just going to ignore your email.
Okay. Well, for me, I played some rather, I would argue, esoteric music at times, and I would say most of the people who talk to me and are excited about my music tend to be people who are also themselves musicians or composers or creative in some way, and so they're often inspired by a particular technique or approach or something that I've done. And I would say the vast majority of the crowd for the kind of music that I tend to make also, they themselves tend to be creative and makers. I always find it interesting when there's someone that approaches me that is not from that background, they're not a performer or something like that. I find that interesting, but for me at least, it seems like the crowd for the kind of music that I make, it seems dominated actually by other creative musicians or whatever. So it's like the norm for me.
I think that's quite true of most small-scale electronica stuff. So for example, even in my genre, if I play a gig, half the audience are in bands, and the rest of those aren't in bands have got a little setup in their bedroom. Exactly the same.
To second that, I think a lot, like certainly in the early days of when we were running our particular night, the crowd was producers, or it was producers and DJs, and it's people from that scene, and I think it grows organically from that. But yeah, a lot of it is just fellow nerds, really, I suppose.
Right. And there's also among fans, there's sometimes a difference between the nerdy fans who are informed, let's say, in certain ways. And also earlier, Tim, when we were talking, one thing that also came up as a discussion was how in different scenes and also in different places, there's different levels of, let's say, tolerance or acceptability for hustling for your career. So like, in some scenes and in certain places, it's totally okay to be calling people up and really self-promoting and so on. Another place that's really looked upon negatively. That seems to be interesting.
We were talking about the number of requests that you get, I get, I'm sure other people get, for would I like to play a date with somebody because we're coming over on tour. No, you're not coming over on tour. You want to come to this country and you want me to organise a gig for you. And you're probably doing exactly the same thing in 15 other towns across the country with 15 other people.
Right.
And it's kind of flattering, but it's not really because I don't want to be a promoter. So I can't afford to lose that much money.
So another question sort of going on the same topic, but a little bit more focused, let's say. Is there anyone that you can think of in particular for each one of you who's played a particularly important role in getting your music heard more widely? So in other words, can you think of anyone or a set of people for that matter who's played an important role, and how so?
I would say for myself, in a strange way, because it's a while back now, and I wouldn't necessarily think that the release reflects what I sound like now or anything like that, but I got signed a long time ago when I was, quite a nascent producer, I guess, to a label called Numbers, and to be honest, at that point I was absolutely no one, and I just kind of sent a couple of tunes, and they happened to, oh yeah, this is great, and it turns up on a vinyl, and like, at that point no one even knew who I was. I didn't know who I was, to be frank. Like, you can tell about the music, But if it wasn't for them, I would have been struggling. It kind of gave me an elevation I would say I wasn't deserving of it at the time in terms of me, my own production cycle or whatever. But I think that's just the way it works. I mean, certainly from a dance music DJ perspective, you're always elevated by someone. It's like the bringing. Someone plays you and then they hear you and it's like, wow, that tune that someone played. But from our perspective, it's always going to be the DJ who brings someone in. Like, as much as the SoundCloud and all that sort of stuff. You might have a tune that gets played on SoundCloud, but unless you're given an endorsement within a scene by that sort of producer, I don't personally think that anyone will make it in like a DJ-based field unless you're getting an endorsement from that DJ or whoever, label or whatever.
You guys have anything else?
Yeah, no. I'm not involved in SoundCloud really at all. I have SoundCloud, but I don't do anything with it. But I was very involved before I got signed, and then decided I wanted to withdraw from all that stuff with MySpace. Good old MySpace, much maligned, but actually it was really quite a pleasant community for a very short period of time. And there was
Whenabouts was that? Can you guess, or can you give us an idea of when that time was? When it was nice?
I think it was 2006. 2006. Early, it was a short period of time. No, there were a bunch of people making similar-ish music to the sort of music that I decided I wanted to make, and I invaded my way into conversations with them in the appalling way that you did on MySpace. Before it got particularly sort of like, I really love your music, can you buy my album on iTunes? You actually listened and stuff. And there were a bunch of people, people like Attilio from Port Royal, and most importantly Mike Cadu from Bit Crush, who runs the label M5MD. And I had the odd, very short conversation with him, and to be honest, I thought he was a bit too cool for me. He wasn't that interested in me. And when Port Royal got signed to M5MD, they told me to send a demo off to him, and I sent it off to him, and he said, I've been listening to your music for ages, yeah, love to. So I would say those people there was a number of people, a lot of them who have ended up signing for the same label, which is quite interesting. I can name five acts that were all unsigned, that I was all pretty friendly with on MySpace, and we did a lot of exchanging remixes and stuff like that, which is where I originally got noticed in that particular scene, and we're all now signed to the same label. Which I'm quite cynic about online stuff, but probably I shouldn't be. Maybe.
I have a very particular person who is someone named Alex McLean, and he does a lot for promoting this kind of work, this kind of generative electronic music or live coding. So if you're at all interested in that kind of stuff and you don't know who Alex McLean is, I would certainly go look him up, or Slub, which is a band that he's in.
Okay.
So.
Well, just to follow up, what sort of things did he do for you to help promote your music?
Well, he's certainly invited me to a lot of shows,
Right.
but also as a researcher, he's done a lot of research that I've found very interesting and,
Okay.
and it's like opened up my mind, I would say, to the kind of things that I'm interested in.
Great. So quick question to the organizers, how are you doing for time? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
All right.
Maybe are there questions from the audience or
All right.
any other way?
Well, audience, how are we for questions? Does anybody have a burning desire to ask a question? Oh yes, you over there. Yell loudly, please.
I was just wondering about how I was going to ask about gender, and whether or not you felt like there was how you felt about what is the overall dominance of men within production and consumption of music.
I think it's a terrible problem and we need to fix it. I think certainly for the shows that I help organize, it's something that we always think about. It's difficult. We had an open call for the July 4th Alga Rave in Brighton at the Loft starting at 7. But we had an open call and we had only 2 women, actually 1 even replied to it. And so it's one of those things like I want to do a lot more, but I feel like it's such a big problem. It needs kind of a larger scale effort, starting with like education, starting with like cultural differences, starting with the attitudes that people have towards people getting in technology. It's a big problem, but I think we need to start addressing it.
Yeah, I'll pipe in. I would say that it's strange because the type of music we make is grime, I suppose. it's traditionally been quite a male-dominated genre, but you know there are a couple of producers coming through now. There's Flavor D, I guess, and on the DJ side like Barely Legal and Madam X, and they're actually really big names at the moment. And Flavor D I would say is one of the bigger producers in our scene, and certainly one of the most talented. But it's has always been quite a male-dominated genre in a sense, so it's quite heartening. I think that's the case. There are a couple of producers I would play who are female, and it is something that is happening. But I don't know, it puzzles me why there's so many males and so few women involved in that sort of thing, or at the very least sending me music. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
I think the same thing. My music's not particularly masculine kind of music, and I get lots of contact from people who buy it and like it, who are female. But interesting enough, don't see many female faces at gigs. Gigs tend to be lots of male other producers of music.
Interesting. So from the online's perspective, it's more gender balanced, you're saying? But
Yeah. And production-wise, it's getting label M5MD. We've only got one woman on the label, which is Maria, who now lives in London.
So from our perspective, I'd say that's quite opposite. All the people I would say are online and engaging with us in terms of this music, I'd say it's 90% male. Whereas our raves, our club nights, maybe it does swing slightly more male, but 60-40% in terms of male to female ratio. Whereas any sort of online interaction on Twitter or SoundCloud, certainly with myself, it's all fellas. Every single one of them fella. I don't know, maybe that says more about me than the club night. I'm not sure, but that is the case. I know.
One more? Is there more?
you have time for one more? Great. In that case, then I have a sort of a very short question to ask all of you guys. Specifically with regards to social media, let's say SoundCloud, but also Facebook, whatever. And that is when you support somebody's track, somebody's recording, let's say through a like or through a reposting or whatever, do you imagine yourself also supporting the person, or is it just the music? So in other words, I'm interested in how much personality and music sort of intersect or not for you guys when it comes to things like promoting somebody else's music, or supporting them, supporting a track or what have it.
I would say from my perspective, as much as SoundCloud is kind of the basis for, obviously, you're uploading the music and all that sort of stuff, a lot of the interactions within producers and DJs within our scene are certainly more Twitter-based than anything else, so it's like from there. So I guess in a sense, or certainly with the people who are overly sharing on social media, which tends to be a lot of people these days, you kind of get to know the person indirectly anyway. I wouldn't say that I'm sitting there thinking, well, he's a really nice fella, but his tunes are terrible, so I'll support him. But equally, if someone will send you a great tune and you think, yeah, but they're a complete prick on Twitter, then strangely, I would be less likely to, to promote their record when it's coming out. It's like, you're an arsehole, I don't care.
Thanks. Do you guys have any comments on that?
There are some people who I have to divorce what I know about them from their music, like say Wagner or something like that.
The classic example.
Yeah, exactly. Just go straight to it. But for the most part, the people whose music I tend to like a lot, especially if I know them personally, I tend to also like their personality. So I would say if I get to know them, it tends to get pretty mixed up pretty quickly. And there are maybe times that I'm more interested in a particular track that they made than maybe I would have been if I didn't know them personally. But
I think it's an issue with fans with Twitter. You're talking about Twitter. I've almost asked for my album back from some of my fans because I find their political opinions so hideously reprehensible.
I don't have any fans.
I say fans. I mean fans in inverted commas.
That solves the problem.
I mean, there have been a
Just
few I've
fixes
blocked, and so but other producers, exactly the same thing. If they make music and you see them on Twitter and they talk rubbish, you're less likely to even listen to the track in the first place.
Yeah, it's strange because it does almost lessen their art, even though there are producers who I know make magnificent music, but I just can't stand them. I'm repelled by the name when I see it in my inbox in a way. I don't know.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for your contributions. This is great. And I guess, do we have a last closing address from the organizers? Or should I? Come on.
thank you.
First off,
Thanks.
round of applause for our panelists.
Okay, so first of all, yes, thanks especially to our musicians, to Slackk, Winterlight, Glitch Lich. Thanks to our special speaker all the way from Berlin, Germany, Luis-Manuel Garcia. And thanks to Anna Jordanos and to our organizer and sort of principal investigator, Daniel. And thanks to all of you for coming out. And please keep in touch with us via our website, and we'll be posting things regularly, so keep an eye out for what we're doing.